Hi everyone, today we have Jade Coles with us, one of the I Like Networking mentors. She is a creative strategist whose niche is designing cultural event programs that resonate with London's creative, forward-thinking audiences. She has over 8 years in cultural production and event programming. She's worked with industry leaders in the hospitality space such as Soho House, festivals like Lost Village. She is a host of startups in the creative industry space such as Creative Entrepreneurs in the Collective. And most recently, she was heading the cultural program at The Wing in London. She does loads and loads of things. She has an incredible experience from being a music star to everything in between. This is a super uplifting conversation, and I think if you are totally lost about what to do in the creative industries, this will definitely help you. Jade, welcome to the I Like Networking podcast.
Hi.
I'm very excited to be talking to you once more through the computer since we haven't yet managed to meet face to face since this all started, which is shocking.
It is actually shocking. I didn't even think of that. We talk so often that it's like that's actually kind of beyond belief slightly.
Yes, it's a little crazy, but we're gonna make it at some point in life. I believe in us.
I do too.
So Jade, before we start going to the nitty-gritty of your career, tell us what is it that you do, where you're from, and where you are currently based.
Okay, well, I am a born and bred Londoner, which is super rare. I haven't disappeared anywhere or moved anywhere more exciting. I've tried on multiple occasions, but London just keeps bringing me back over and over again for various reasons. So I was literally born in Camberwell, which, if you don't know it, is in South London, and I currently reside in Peckham, so about 20 minutes walk away. I did leave briefly to, visit and live in the other territories of London, north and east, obviously not west. But I've settled back here. I live just opposite Peckham Rye Park, which I absolutely love and has been a real delight over the lockdown period, just to be near some green space. So I feel super lucky for that. And then in terms of what I do, always an amazing and ambiguous and ever-changing, evolving question, but mostly I deal in kind of cultural production, event programming, and now coaching for creatives, artists and makers in the startup space. So what that looks like is programming digital events at the moment, though I've had a background in curating programs for festivals like Lost Village, large scale co-living spaces like the Collective in Mason and Fifth, and big members clubs like Soho House, which I'm sure is all stuff that we'll dive into in due course. But yeah, I've been kind of thinking about what it is I do, and there's something in the nature of the network, bringing communities together, bringing people together that might not normally meet. Those are the kinds of things that I love doing, but you can't just be a connector as a job, I don't think, anyway, or I haven't worked out the business model for it yet. So I think the way that I do that mostly is through event programming. So all of the things that I love to do, bring people together, talk about interesting things, the kind of creative output for that is events programs for spaces and websites and programs and stuff like that.
I love that, Jade. That's a very good introduction. Although I heard that little sneer at West London, but okay, we can work on that relationship. I feel like when I bring you to my specific part of the hood, you're gonna love it. Okay, it's gonna be great.
I know us Londoners are just very territorial. It's I don't I don't even know why. It's like as soon as you're born, it's like you know that like these are the bits that you hang out in, and you don't hang out in the other territories. But yeah, I'm always willing to be turned. Somebody did say to me that I was kind of a South London girl with West London sensibilities. So maybe there is a chapter of my life that will take me that way.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll do one meeting in Peckham and one meeting in Ladbroke Grove, and then we can discuss. Okay. Well, I've been in London for 6 years, and I lived in 8 places because London it's just so easy to find a place to live. but I have never been south. I've never lived south, basically. It's the only place left to conquer. So maybe next time.
Yeah, next time. Okay, well, I could wax lyrical about the benefits of being this side of the pond, but I'll save that for a different podcast. Maybe one that's sponsored by an estate agent.
That's a great idea. We'll get working on that. But so Jade, tell us one really bad work experience you've had. This can be anything. It could be an interview, a job itself, anything that really disastrous happened in an event. Just, tell us something really terrible that happened and, how you made it through.
Yeah, it's when I saw that question on the list, I was like, wow, okay, Isabel's going to go in with a real hard hitter. I think kind of there's two kind of really good examples of disasters, but I think, broadly speaking, when I haven't been able to thrive or flourish in a role, it's probably been because that role or that space or that business doesn't align with my personal values. And that tends to mean I find it really hard to kind of give the care and the love that's needed. Oh, sorry, my Slack's going off. Probably should have thought about turning that off, shouldn't I? The kind of care that's needed for me to do the best work possible. So when I transitioned into doing agency work, for example, I found that really challenging because I'd been used to so much autonomy and creative autonomy and designing programs. And then suddenly, when my work was so dictated by brands and their brand values and what their brand looked like, and there was sort of no room for maneuver, I think I found that time, and I was in and out of agencies for about 2 years, really, really challenging. But I would say kind of the biggest disaster that I've had to kind of get through was actually a job interview years ago for a large-scale lifestyle publication, let's say, that has quite a big media arm. I'd spent years kind of building a relationship with the director of that media space, and they finally had a job for a production manager overseeing a large 3-day conference dedicated to kind of beauty, lifestyle, wellness, and all things kind of womanhood. And I was like the perfect person for it. They spent ages designing this pitch full of all the talent that they should get, researching their costs, kind of built this huge thing that I was gonna present to them. I remember I bought this insanely expensive outfit that I definitely couldn't afford at the time, that then was delayed and at the post office, and I insisted upon getting up early to get to the post office to get this outfit, as if this outfit was going to be kind of like the thing that got me the job, which absolutely it wouldn't have been. I then had pre-booked a cab to get there because I was like, I'm going to read over my notes in the car, like be really, really prepared. Got in the cab in rush hour on one of the main bridges into town. The cab breaks down completely and is like, I can't take you any further. And I was like, what? My heart is palpitating. So I had to kind of run across this bridge, try and get another cab. I was only actually 5 minutes late for the interview, and I did email them saying that I'd had this disaster. And probably now that I'm a bit older, I would have been able to kind of whip that into a really great anecdote. But I was just completely drained and stressed from the whole experience. And when I got there, I just couldn't settle. I tried to run through my pitch as best I could, but I felt really nervous. There was somebody else in the interview room with me who I could just tell didn't like me, and you could really feel that they were disappointed with what I was providing. I then managed to knock over a glass of water onto one of the people interviewing me.
Oh my god.
I was just like, oh my god, I leave. And then eventually this hellscape was over after 90 minutes. I left. And then when I got outside, I realized I'd left my handbag downstairs in the interview room. So I had to go back into the building and be like, oh, I've left my bag downstairs, and then go and get my bag, which I think was the whole thing just made me seem very scatty and disorganized. Whereas in actual fact, I had gone to very extreme lengths to be the most organized person I could be. However, silver lining, and I was very, very upset about this for a very long time. In fact, reliving it is really calling it back to me. But somebody else a year later actually got that same job, working on that same event with the same team that I would have worked with. And I happened to meet them at a networking event, and they're like, yes, I'm working for X brand doing this. And I'm like, how are you finding it? And she was like, I hate it. She was like, it's horrible. The work culture is horrible. I'm expected to be there, like 6 a.m. till midnight. No one leaves. The event itself is like massively over budget. This isn't controlled by this, etc., etc. Like she's like, I can't wait for this project to be over and get out, like run for the hills, like don't go near it. And I was just like, wow, okay, so I really missed a curveball here. And yeah, so that's my example of a disaster. But you get through it. And in terms of kind of, how I think about interviews and stuff now, in retrospect, I was trying to be so much like the brand that was interviewing me and fit into their box. And that is why it went wrong, because I wasn't my authentic self. I should have just rocked up in the clothes that I wear every day and just been the person that I am. And actually, maybe the interview process would have gone a lot further. So that was a real lesson. Like, don't try and push yourself into a box that you don't fit into, or a company culture that you don't fit into, or a value system that you don't fit into. Just avoid all of that, because you do your best work when you're your most authentic self.
Wow, I love that. Maybe I should have kept this question for the end, because that's a really uplifting way to No, but I love that, and it's I guess it's good that you didn't get that job at the end, but you never know that right at the time. So looking back, it's always easy that when you're living it and you're like, oh my god, and you feel like a failure, and it's just traumatizing.
Yeah, exactly. It's totally all of that stuff, but I think it's also about the concept of opportunity. And it's really hard to kind of get your head around, and especially with the, now with the backdrop of 2020, another recession, this might be like the fourth recession that I've lived through or something. I can't remember how many times I've heard on the news that the UK is in a recession. I think the first recession of my lifetime was literally when I first left my BA from Camberwell. So I've kind of always existed in this sort of, I don't know, sort of like slightly anxious, slightly terror, like, are there any jobs? Is there any money? But opportunities are constantly shifting and changing. Businesses are constantly shifting and changing. Even pre-COVID, that was happening, whether somewhere was going to scale or not scale. An agency gets a huge project in, they need to ramp up resource. They lose a couple of projects, resource goes down. Obviously, we've seen a boom in people freelancing, becoming more entrepreneurial, starting their own businesses, which I think is amazing, and carving out, a niche for themselves in this kind of, massive economy. So I think at the time, I probably would have felt like that was the only job for me and I needed to get that job. But actually having a bit more of a broader view, taking a step back and being a bit more like, okay, that didn't work out, like what's next is more of a valuable attitude.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, especially now we're seeing how it's important to be adaptable and flexible, because things are changing every minute with this slightly crisis that we're going through in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, lots of businesses have pivoted to whatever degree of success, but I do believe in a certain amount of personal agility, and again, I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but my bread and butter has really been in events exist primarily in the live space. Now we don't have that live space, but institutions, museums, galleries, they've all moved a lot of their events content online, or their cultural content online. So, it's worth thinking about how you can integrate yourself into these new ways of working, and to not be kind of scared of them, but to see these as like additional skills and additional things that you can add to your bow. And I'm just a real ambassador for that kind of attitude. And I've been really lucky over 2020. I've done a lot of digital programming work, and I know that there's a question later which goes in a little bit more about what an events curator does. But you can take a lot of the skill set that you have and apply it into new areas. if you give a little bit of time, give yourself a little bit of space to upskill, train, and also be in your stretch zone, get uncomfortable for a little bit learning new skills and see where that takes you.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, we can talk about exactly what an events curator does now, and then we'll go back. There are no rules. We don't need to do this chronologically.
There are no rules. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of rules anyway, so that works for me. I'm always like, I prefer a framework to a rule. I think the amount, if I had £1 for every time I said that, I could probably write a book on it or something like that. But yeah, an events curator, in its very simplest essence, is somebody who looks at the business that they're in. So that might be a museum or a gallery. They might be looking at an exhibition. They might be looking at a hospitality site, a restaurant. They take the key elements of that brand building vision, mission, and distill it into a number of themes that are relevant to, today's society, future society, or whatever your learning objectives are. Those themes are often made into event pillars for a brand or a company, etc. And then what an events curator does is find the right people to talk about that theme or topic or idea. So it's really kind of like structural. And the example that I often use for events is that, a great events program, for me anyway, should look and feel a bit like a lifestyle magazine brought to life. So, when you're reading your favorite kind of magazine that you pick up regularly, whether that's Stylist or Courier or the Evening Standard, what you want is that real balance of content, some stuff about fashion, some stuff about food and drinks, some stuff about this, some stuff about that. So that kind of thinking still very much applies. And I guess I can give you a bit of a real life example of how that works with one of the clients that I'm working for at the moment, who are called Creative Entrepreneurs. So Creative Entrepreneurs is a first of its kind online membership dedicated to teaching creatives more business skills so that they can be successful using their creative assets or being more creative or making more things. So that in a nutshell is what that brand is about. So I'll look at the vision and mission of that brand and go, okay, so it's creatives, it's business, it's modern business, it's emerging markets, it's how to make money with what you own, it's building revenue streams, it's new online platforms that are about creativity and money like Patreon. And I'll draft that into lots of ideas, distill that into 3 or 4 pillars, which might be finances, inspiration, learning. And then I'll fill that with even more ideas, which are what those event topics are. And then I'll look at who can talk on those event topics, reach out to them if I don't already know them, talk to them about the events program and what we're aiming to do, and then contract them to talk about the event. Then there's some other kind of nitty-gritty logistical stuff, which kind of blends the world of events coordinator and events manager, because as events curator, you might wear multiple hats in that space. And you do things like run of shows, which are, kind of the timing sheet that tells you when things are going to happen, when people in the audience or online are able to ask questions. I'm also often the person that drafts the questions for speakers because I've designed the rest of the program. That kind of makes sense. And then you might do a lot of the marketing around it. So making sure that people know that event's on and that they can come to it by making sure there's great visual design assets and the kind of creative direction piece, which you might not do when you're a junior events curator or if you work for a very big brand. But certainly if you work in the startup space, which is what I love, is that you will probably be able to really kind of have your hands around the look and the feel of that event and everywhere that it's seen from a communication perspective. And that's when I get really excited.
I love that. I'm the same. I mean, we're both events babies, so But tell us how you got there. So you went to fine arts. No, you studied fine arts in uni.
Yeah, I gave doing fine art a good bash. Is what I I think I peaked at like 14 to 16, and then it was pretty much a downward spiral from there. But yeah, I actually was lucky enough to go to a visual and performing arts school called Brit School, which is in Croydon, which is a free visual arts and performing arts college. It's kind of known for pumping out great musical talent, including Kay Tempest, KTB, Adele, kind of most famously. Some people say Amy Winehouse went there, but I would need to check my facts on that one. I certainly didn't see her. Kate Nash. And it's an amazing place. It's got, a full kind of theatre and production studio, artist studio spaces, huge drama rooms, a dance department. It literally was 2 years of going to the, in inverted commas, fame school. And it was just an absolute playground for creativity. And through that time, I learned about arts festivals. I went up to Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which completely blew my mind. And I learned about immersive theatre. We did stuff with Shunt, who are a big immersive performance group. And it was just like, wow, this is just, the cultural and creative space is where I need to be. I had always loved art galleries, kind of always drew a little bit and kind of done other little things. But yeah, that kind of sixth form experience, I would say, really informed my thinking. And then I decided to do an arts foundation and then, a fine art degree specializing in performance, video and sound, which is so technical. And I'm definitely I have no technical rigor, but I think MySpace and stuff like that was quite big. And I was a bit of a nerd. So I was quite good at that stuff then. But when I think back, I'm like, how was I coding all of these websites and editing videos? Because that's totally not my brain space now. But I guess what I realized when I was doing that work was that the kind of marriage of performance video and sound would create these sort of immersive environments or micro events. And I don't think I would have loved being on a classic events course because they're quite marketing and business led. And I wasn't ready for that yet. But I kind of got to explore how events work through this very conceptual medium, which was great. And I had a tutor who is a great artist called Jeanette Thomas. Do check her out. She's an amazing, amazing prolific video artist and has done lots of experimental event stuff and experimental film festival stuff. And she said to me, do you know what? You have the personality for the arts festival circuit. She was like, I think that is where you should focus your attention. You are really good at bringing things together, joining the dots, seeing the kind of trends of what's interesting, understanding what the kind of marketing vision is. She was like, you just think about this stuff really differently. And she was like, what I've actually seen you do really well is coordinate any project which involves getting other people's work, their artistry together and then showcasing it to the wider world. So I was like, do you know what? Actually, I do think I would love that because I'm also very kind of, adrenaline and I love the kind of buzz of the show is very much me. Or was very much me. So I did a bunch of internships with the 6th London Short Film Festival, a bunch of film studios, basically anyone that would take me. And I would just cold email them and be like, hello, what you do is really interesting. Can I do something with you? And they would usually say yes, which was great. And I just kind of built a bit of a mini portfolio in that way. I was still at university then, so that was a bit nuts. And I also had a job in Topshop in Oxford Circus. So that was relentless. And when I look back at that time, I'm like, how are you doing free work and paid work and your university work? And I have to say my university work, was the thing that suffered ultimately. And I went from someone who could get a first right down to somebody that didn't get a first. And I don't have any huge regrets about that, but I think it's something to really think about when you're, trying to maximize your potential in the kind of creative industries. And then when I was in my last year of university, I was invited to join a music group, a kind of art music group. You have to imagine it's 2008, 2009-ish sort of time. Indie music, new rave is very big. I'm in my early 20s and I get asked to join this, art punk choir called Gaggle, which was a 22-piece all-female riot girl choir of all ages, people that were in their teenage years, right to women in their 70s, all singing together over the top of kind of drum and bass beats. And we managed to get signed by an amazing record label called Transgressive, who have the likes of Foles and Johnny Flynn on their label, which was absolutely mad. We released an album called From the Mouth of the Cave, which got a great review in The Guardian and an atrocious review in NME, who gave it 1 out of 5 stars and said listening to it was like listening to a washing machine that was broken. So that was pretty hilarious. But from that,
Delightful.
it was like, it was a moment. But everything that we did with that band was very, everything was like costumed. It was very feminist. It was very political. We did stuff for Wow Festival. We, did all of the usual kind of festival circuit and that kind of thing. And that was again a real eye opener to me in terms of the broadness of the events industry. And suddenly I was like, do you know what? I don't really like being a performer, because I feel like when you're a performer, you get shoved around a lot. You've got to get in the coach really early. You don't know if you've got your food coming. Then you've got to perform to people that you don't know. I was like, I am on the wrong side of this. Like, I need to be in production because I am a control freak and I want to be getting this stuff out there, but I don't necessarily want to be the person that's out there. So Deborah, who founded Gaggle, and I sort of worked a little bit on the production company side. Together, we did a play for the Amilda Theatre for their Greek season, which was a new version of Lysistrata starring Charlotte Church. 500 people saw that, which was amazing. We did more stuff with Wow Festival. We did an art show for Fatus Ustek at ICA as part of Fig 2, which I completely kind of project managed and designed, which was amazing, and had a few small events in that. We released an app. We just did loads of creative projects together. And really that was like 8 or 9 years of my life. So that was really big and very DIY and very trying to get funding and selling tickets for a fiver and being very on the ground. But after that, I kind of flipped into the luxury sector and managed to get a job working for a little known hospitality brand called Soho House in their head office, overseeing their under 27 membership program, which at the time was very small, and they wanted to scale it up through discounts and events and stuff like that. So I oversaw that for a few years. Through that, I saw a really big gap for the houses to do more events programming that was powered by the community that they already had. So I started working on a number of events, the first of which was a late night film club. I had an amazing illustrator design the postcard called Rebecca Strixon. So again, you're starting to see my kind of creative direction influence kind of coming in there, even though it was a bigger brand. And I eventually did so much event stuff that I was able to move from membership into marketing, oversee the events program at Shoreditch House, which was some work that I just absolutely loved doing. We did kind of 40 events a month across the whole cultural and creative spectrum. And I did some things at Shoreditch House that have never, ever been done at any of the Soho houses before, including putting an entire orchestra on the roof to do a changing of the season show at the end of September, a number of large-scale live shows, on the foot of the pool with people like Bombay Bicycle Club. And I also was able to convince, the directors and people that be to let me put on a contemporary dance show in the summer at the foot of the pool, which was all stuff that they were like, our members aren't going to be into this. They just want to eat their pasta and have a Negroni and chill. And I'm like, just trust me, this is going to be amazing. And it truly was, a real standout moment. And people still talk about it and think about those times fondly now. And then after that, I went into agencies for a bit, which, like I said, I didn't love, but I felt like I needed to do. I did a bunch of work thinking that I might try and go into advertising for a bit, didn't like it, thought I might try and go into radio production, didn't feel quite right. Or actually, I kind of loved radio, but I just don't think the access was there for me with all the different roles that I'd had and stuff like that. Went freelance for a bunch of co-living spaces, hotels, and anyone that would take me, doing lots of events programming across the board. Then was headhunted to launch The Wing in London, which was a co-working space in Fitzrovia across a 5-storey townhouse. And I closed out on that role when 2020 kind of hit. And we all got made redundant, which is a real shame, but ended up to be a beautiful opportunity because I actually had some time when I was on furlough to plan what I wanted to do next. And as you can probably tell by this long-winded career history, I hadn't really had a break. And I suddenly had 3 months where I was able to just think and be like, okay, what do I love doing? How can I make money from it? What are my rates? Let's do the maths on this. Like, what does success look like to me? I had some great coaching calls. I got a therapist, and I just really used that time to plan ahead. And I've been freelancing ever since. Like I say, working for creative entrepreneurs, very aligned with my vision, which is, all about creatives being able to make money from what they earn, because that's really what I'd always been trying to do. So I get to do that on a macro level, mentoring with you, Isabel, and the great I Like networking group. And then I've actually got a few private clients for coaching and development. So kind of blending the holistic ideas of coaching with a bit of mentoring to support freelancers and people starting their own business, which is something I want to do more and more of.
Oh my God, that's incredible. I don't think no one has been able to give an overview of their career quite as you did right now. Like, this is what happened. This is amazing. And I think that's something we're going to talk about in some of the courses we're going to deliver as well. Soft plug there, guys. But I think it's amazing that you had the opportunity to, explore all those things when you're young, and then have someone tell you, maybe you should look into this, because I'm a little bit jealous, I'm going to say, because in my experience, it was just like the blind leading the blind. There was no event course or arts. It was just, yeah, let's try this and that. And what's the name of that? Is that what a producer does? And just like shockingly difficult to find things. But it's amazing how you were able, I think, to change from one career to the other. And so one thing that I wanted to ask you is, you just gave us a really amazingly coherent narrative about your journey, even though you did lots and lots of different things, which I think it's something a lot of people struggle. I personally struggled because I had all these interests as well and didn't know how to present the best story for people in terms of telling my story. Is this something that was always easy for you to create the narrative to tell other people what you're about, or is this something that you learn with time?
That's a really good question. And to go back to your point before about like there were no real courses and stuff like that, again, like I totally resonate with you. And I think actually that's why I ended up bobbing around so many different industries, because I was trying to find like, where are the people that have the same mindset as me? Where are the people that have where's my tribe? Where's my community? I just couldn't really find them. And I really struggled for a long time, because I thought, why am I such a generalist? I like all of these different things, but I could see a lot of my friends that had studied architecture or advertising, they were like making their niche. They were an art director, they were an engineer, they were this, they were that. And I just kind of felt like this sort of, wobbly mass that was just absorbing new trends and ideas and sort of popping them out there and not knowing where they were going. But I did get another really good piece of advice from someone else called Vilma, who is a witch. And she said to me, sometimes, there isn't a language for what you do, because you are part of the people that are creating that language. So don't be afraid if you do something and you're like, no one seems to be doing this. That's kind of a good thing and will probably pay off later on. But it can feel a bit weird when you're kind of one of the few, you know what I mean? And then in terms of telling my story, is that something that I learned how to do? I think, what the really good thing about programming events is, you also get to watch a lot of events and learn a lot of things and take in a lot of information. And I think, again, these lessons are lessons that I learned from doing events with people that work in advertising, who were talking about pitching for ideas and pitching for business and telling their business story and all of this stuff. And I was a bit like, hang on, like this is gold dust if you can kind of really explain who you are and what you do. So I think those lessons I really learned from kind of advertising and more the events agency side. And then I applied them to me and what I like doing. And you know what? And I actually said this to the person that I'm mentoring through your program, Isabel, I change my story all the time. Like, let's do this exact same interview every year on the same day, and let's see how I decide to tell my story that time. Because I think, over time, you'll see it's changing. There's been times where I've called myself, a cultural production expert, an experienced architect, Now I'm using words like mentor and coach more often because I'm building in those skill sets. So I think the story isn't static, but really doing an inventory of what you've done before, what you've been paid to do, and what you love doing is a really good like place to start, so you can holistically understand like um what you like doing and what that means for you. So I have practiced it over time, but I've also edited it and changed it a lot depending on what I'm doing and the kind of work that I want to do. So I think people should feel empowered to do that.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm the same. I had to learn how to tell my story because we are very similar, I feel like, Jade, in our experiences. I also struggled all my life to find a niche, and not only in work but also with friends. I was so jealous of people that only had one group of friends. And I was like, oh, I wish I could just do that. Like now I want to be friends with all these people and I want to read all these things. And my friends would to make fun of me that with me, they never knew if they were gonna get Harry Potter or Dostoevsky. It was like all the spectrum of the interests,
Yeah.
and they could never know what I would be talking about. It could be Dolly Parton, it could be Nietzsche, and he'd be like, "Okay, that was a bit of a freak." But I love that. I mean, now I made peace with the fact that I would never have a niche because that's just not who I am. But maybe not the way the world is usually set up for.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Just because there are these systems that suggest that one should do a certain thing, be a certain way. Like, I think what you're also nodding to is my comments before on authenticity. Like, if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. And yes, again, we always joke about the kind of, highbrow, lowbrow conversations and kind of how you can constantly split between the two. But it's a great thing for your brain to be able to do. I'm not very good at remembering details. I guess that is like where I kind of fall down. I've got, some great, like super academic friends who've got PhDs and amazing stuff like that. And they can be like, on page 333 of Zizek's, blah, 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 he says, and then they'll be able to quote the exact sentence. I will never be able to be that person. But what I'm able to absorb quite quickly is like the concept or the idea or what's being suggested or told or said. And yeah, that's something that I've grown to really like about who I am. But similar to you, I had to really make peace with it.
Yes, and I one tip that I got was at one point people asked, what are people always asking you for? And then I actually started this newsletter in the beginning of quarantine, which was called Shit I Like. Apologies for the cursing, but because literally I had that suggestion and people are always asking me for a lot of random things like, oh, do you have articles on this, or do you have podcasts on running or podcasts on mental health or anything? And because I have that interest, so I decided to just do the newsletter, which is like a digest of everything that I consume. A lot like you, I like absorbing ideas and trends, but I'm not necessarily someone that will go really deep and do a PhD or any of those things. I mean, I did do a master's. I'm not very good at academic learning, I'd say.
Well, yeah. Well,
which is okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that, because that is a limiting belief. And I obviously, because I'm studying coaching at the moment, I'm reading a lot about limiting beliefs. So let's say that at the moment the kind of institutionalized setup of education isn't set up for Isabel and Jade to do their kind of PhD and what they like at the time. But if we keep doing what we're doing in 5 or 6 years' time, it may well be. And we might both be sitting together in a university going, okay, actually suddenly the world has turned and there is a way for us to kind of do this kind of stuff and do these ideas. I too have a master's. I did the first few years of a business master's in creative industries management over an arts university just outside of London. And that was really because I wanted to concretize like everything that I've been doing creatively into business. And that's kind of where my fascination between creativity and commerce came around, and my real passion for people making money from like the amazing creative things that they can do. And when I learned that, business philosophies can kind of be applied, to almost anything. And once you understand those philosophies, it gets really interesting and you can get really creative with business philosophies. I had always been told, well, actually, as a child, I was rubbish at maths. I was categorically rubbish at maths. So I thought I was never going to be able to do anything to do with like finance or maths. But if you get into events, you're going to have to do budgets. So, you have to be close to the numbers. And when I was on my business masters, there was this whole module on financial forecasting, and it was like 13 weeks long, and I was terrified of it. Like, I actually cried at points because I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to get my head around this. But that was all because I had this limiting belief about myself from when I was younger, because I was bad at maths when I was like, 12, that when I was 28, I wasn't going to be able to do it. But actually, financial forecasting is really creative because it's about problem solving. It's about looking at the numbers and going, okay, why are we spending over here? Is there an alternative way that we could do things? What if we change the hours on this? What if we change the production on that? It is total creative thinking, just applied in a different way. So yeah, I also kind of did that, but I struggle with the kind of, the day-to-day kind of memory of stuff is very, very much lacking for me. But yeah, I think one day you and I will be on that PhD together, Isabel. Maybe that will be the first time that we meet at this rate.
Oh God, no! Let's hope it's a little bit before that.
Yeah, I think so too.
No, but I love that. And I think, a lot of people that I've worked with make fun of me because I love spreadsheets. I love budgets, because if you work in events or in like production, you kind of need to know numbers, because the way you break down what an event's going to be, it involves a lot of steps, but also all the budgets, right? Like, that's how you deliver things. You have to get ideas and pragmatically put them into steps and numbers and costs. Otherwise, you can't really do it in a tangible way. I mean, you can dream all you want, but at some point, this needs to come to the real world, right? So this is something that I think it's important when people talk about, being, even if you are an arts curator, you need to know about logistics, you need to know about cost of transportation and stuff. And it's not all just ideas and making, great connections, right? There's a lot of practical aspects that I agree we shouldn't put ourselves into, oh my God, it's impossible, because we don't work in a bank, different sort of spreadsheets that we need, but you need a little bit of number literacy, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. It is really helpful, and it's helpful for a number of reasons, right? Because you might, if you want to work in the more kind of experiential side of events, then you kind of got to think about things like, is that if a brand comes to you with £30,000 and you design something that they are not going to be able to make for £30,000, then you are not going to win that client. So you need to understand how to scale your idea up and down so that somebody else can buy your idea in that instance, and that you still make a profit from selling that idea to the brand and producing it and making it and all of the costs that are involved in that. So yeah, and another really good piece of advice that I got actually when I was on my MBA from the woman teaching finance, she was like, the best advice I can give you is try and get as close to the numbers as you can in any job that you're in, because if you are somebody that understands the numbers, especially if you work in the creative industries, you're probably a bit of a rare beast. So, it is worth, if it's something that you haven't attacked yet, or, budgets just aren't something that you've had to deal with, like, there are lots of different online courses, things you can do. You can set up a personal project to, sell 100 t-shirts and see if you can make a profit on it. There are lots of things you can do to kind of just test the water. And you don't need to be dealing in big numbers, You can deal in relatively small numbers, but numbers are also important if you're setting your rates and you're a freelancer and you are understanding what your rate card is and what you charge for the different services that you offer. So, if you want to make money from your creativity, at some point you are going to have to look at the numbers. You are going to have to understand what success looks like to you financially so that you are not struggling to pay your rent or your expenses. You will need to ensure that you've got enough money to cover things like your business insurance and ultimately, down the line, your tax. So it is unavoidable, unfortunately, but you can make some of those things easier on yourself by, using a vast amount of like platforms like Xero and QuickBooks, by practicing, by being somebody that checks numbers regularly. I actually think everybody can do stuff with numbers, but the anxiety and the fear comes from checking the budgets or checking your bank account or checking that the invoice has been paid. Like there's a real anxiety around that, and I've certainly felt that in the past, people not wanting to chase an invoice if it's late, that kind of thing. But I think once you kind of get over that hurdle, it's a much nicer place to be generally from a kind of mental health and wellness perspective.
Yes, I agree. We all need to know how to ask to be paid. I mean, I think at some point you, as a freelancer, or you end up doing jobs or taking on projects that you think are not as well paid, but are going to be very good on your portfolio, and so it's an investment in yourself, and that's fine. But yeah, like just pure art doesn't pay your bills, and so you have to be smart about it. But yeah, and I think there are so many resources out there now, and there's a really good course on financial literacy for women called VestPod, and it's all about investment and so on. But it's really good if you've never tackled it, and I think that should be something that everyone gets educated on, more than anything else.
Yeah.
I feel like that we can do that on our PhD. We can install that.
Yeah, we can absolutely install that. And politically, if you're female, things tend to cost more money, but you get paid less. If you're a person of color, things tend to cost more money, but you get paid even less. So it is definitely worth kind of really doing your research and understanding the numbers. I was actually sent, I don't know where I found it, otherwise I would share it with your community, this amazing Google spreadsheet where anybody could put in, like, anonymously what their job was and what their day rate was, and whether they were white, black, male, female, or other, and some other details around like their experience. So you could get a really like good picture of what people are charging. And it's not going to be a surprise to anyone that kind of white men were charging more off the bat than women, and people of color were charging the least of every group in the category. So if you can do a bit of research on kind of rate transparency and what people are charging, that could be of really huge benefit to you. I remember I did an event which Cindy Gallop was talking at. Who, if you don't know who Cindy Gallop is, she's a powerhouse in the kind of advertising and creative industries. She's done all kinds of stuff, and she also runs something called Make Love Not Porn, which is all about getting people to engage with what real sex is. And she has this kind of like 10 points for business plan. And she was talking about it in this session. And she said, everyone needs to just ask for more money, and just getting comfortable with asking for more money. And she was like, if you don't know how much is the right amount of money to ask for in a job interview, it's the most you can say out loud without laughing. And I was just like mind blown, because she was like, you will know if you say an amount that you know is ridiculous, you are not going to be able to say it out loud and leave it on the table. But that figure that you can say, think about what it is in your head, and anybody listening to this, think about what that figure might be in your head for a certain job. They were like, say it out loud, and just do it. And and she's totally right. And I had a job once overseeing head of events for a very, very large company in the property sector, and I was on like 42k when they hired me. I had to really negotiate for that 42k, and the person that had the job before me, I later found out, was on £91,000.
No,
which is insane. Considering they had half the workload because they'd launched less properties, less buildings, but they'd had quite a kind of burnt relationship with that person, and therefore felt really ambiguous about paying a large sum of money. But also, I didn't put anything close to that sum of money on the table. There's absolutely no way at that point in my career I would have asked for 90 grand, but somebody else did, and they got it. So you've got to really think about that. Other people have thought about these things. They have planned it in their head. They've done the research, and they are getting those higher rates. And to your point about promotion, I do think this is important, because when you're developing who you are as like a personal brand, it is important to think about what those promotional opportunities are. And I do stuff for free still. I do events for free. I talk at stuff for free, and I don't mind doing that, so long as it isn't a strategic piece of work, or something that is going to kind of take me a lot of physical time, because my time is obviously the highest value that I have because my business is a service. So if it's something that isn't going to take too long, is going to benefit a community or benefit someone else, then I'm happy to do it. And if I get some like great kind of PR kickback from that, then great. But just make sure that you're just giving what is viable when you've got those free opportunities, rather than doing what you actually do as a craft for free where possible. Because I think that is a big difference.
For sure. And Jade, you are super, like, you come across as a very confident person. You're a great public speaker. And you mentioned at the beginning that you would cold call people to get, internships and gigs. Has that always come naturally to you? Was this something that you ever felt any pushback from, the way you are? Or is it something that you worked on as well as a skill into, in air quotes, selling yourself?
Yeah, I think I've naturally been quite confident and independent, and you kind of have to be, because of the kind of performance side, I guess, of what I did when I was younger. You kind of have to have a certain level of confidence, but I certainly wasn't the person that's talking to you now, however many years ago. That's taken time, it's taken practice. I have, been on a lot of learning and development programs. I've been on like the Claw leadership program where you practice a lot, how you come across. Self-awareness is something that I'm really interested in. But I'd say there are kind of points in my life where that confidence has blossomed, and maybe I'm in one of those blossoming periods now, I think, maybe, just as I'm saying it. But there have certainly been times where I have not felt like it. And those are normally times when I'm doing too much work, and I'm probably going to burn out. And that has happened to me on a couple of occasions. And yeah, anybody that's experienced burnout on this call will know it's really physically, emotionally and mentally draining. And I actually suffer from panic attacks when I'm under very extreme levels of stress. And that's something that I, work every day to manage. And, I'm at a point now where that doesn't infiltrate my life, because I've set my life up in a way where I've got more flexibility, I've got more free time, I've set boundaries with people that I work with and the clients that I have. But this is all stuff that I've had to work on, because I've had to reflect on, what is the project that I'm doing? Did it pay enough? Why is it making me feel this way? Is that the right sort of client for me to be working with? Etc. etc. Because I have a real, I'm a Cancerian, like I have a real emotional reaction to stuff, and I really care about the work that I do. But yeah, I'm sometimes super bad at setting boundaries, which has this effect on my overall anxiety. So yeah, I'm confident, but I'm still also a human person with the full spectrum of feelings and emotions on any given day, as we all are, and especially creative people can be, I think, extremely sensitive to a variety of factors and stuff like that. So yeah, I work on it. I think personal development and growth, and having a growth mindset is something that I really invest in as a person, and I make time for that, and I make time to learn in new spaces, and do all that kind of stuff. So yes, there is an element of naturalness to it. I'm an ENTP, so I'm a little bit more on the extroverted spectrum. I'm an only child, which means that you kind of have to learn to make friends, and you have to kind of force yourself to be out there a little bit more, because you don't have the kind of buffer of your brothers and sisters. And I've worked in a lot of places, where you have to be relatively front facing. But I think having that reflection and self-awareness is really what's got me to where I am today.
I love that. And I think that ties in really well with my question to one of my final questions, because I know we're running out of time. But basically, you've gone through lots of different jobs, and now you work as a freelancer, but you said that you had some time to actually assess what you wanted to do. And I think a lot of people in the creative industries, once they're trying to get their first job, or if they've been, made redundant, like lots of us have been, kind of panic and start applying to anything online. And obviously that doesn't always yield the best results. So I think it would be nice to hear from you, like, how do you go about searching for either jobs or leads or, freelance gigs? Is it something that you do intentionally? Do you just send out leads to loads and lots of people? Like, how do you approach it?
Yeah, I think, to circle back slightly to the planning, and like, yes, like there is a kind of scarcity mindset amongst kind of freelancers, or if you've just been made redundant, like I totally understand that, like that panic, especially when you've got your rent due, you've got your bills due, and if you're not able to get like certain government funding and stuff like that, it can be really stressful. But I still implore, if you can, even if it's just for 30 minutes, for you to take a step back before you apply for anything and really think about like what you want to do. Like, do you want to freelance? Do you definitely want to go into a permanent role? And once you've assessed that, think about who can help you. Okay. So lots of jobs, if you are a freelancer, are probably going to come from your network. You're probably going to need to do a lot of self promotion to make sure people know that you're available for work, the sort of work that you do. Maybe you want to think about what your niche is within whatever sector that you're in. And something that I've been doing with my private clients, who are like graphic designers mostly, and people that work in craft, ceramics and illustration, what we talk about a lot is like finding your like real niche in a crowded market. Because once you know what that niche is, if you are going to cold call or cold email or send your portfolio, you at least know to start with the businesses that are aligned with the kind of work you want to make or do make, etc., which is going to make for a much easier, marriage later on down the line. So, really starting there is really good. If you're trying to get a permanent role, do everything you can to make yourself look as good as possible. And I was actually doing some CV reviews for some ex-team members of mine who sadly have been made redundant recently. And I was like, if you want me to look at anything, have a look. And I looked at this person's CV who kind of does social media and content. And I know them, so I know they are extremely bubbly, personable, charismatic, funny, deeply embedded in like popular culture, really cares about their religion. These were all amazing selling points. But when you read the like hobbies and personal interests, there was no personality there whatsoever. It was like, I like TV and films and going out every now and again. That was it. And it's like, people buy from people. Like, use your CV as an opportunity to really showcase your personality. Recruiters are looking through hundreds of CVs. Businesses are looking through hundreds of CVs. People mostly want to work with someone that they think they can sit next to and they're going to like them, okay, as well as having the skill set. So don't be afraid to really show your personality on a CV or in your portfolio, because, people buy personality. Like, they truly do buy personality. And if you can embed that into anything that you're applying for, then that's amazing. And I'd say that works across the board. The only time that I've had negative feedback about that approach was actually when I was headhunted by a very large tech search engine company, let's say, to do some events for a project. And they actually told me that they thought I had too much personality to work for them, and that I was probably going to be too autonomous and too creative. And I actually think they were right, because what they needed was somebody who could just deliver, a kind of cookie cutter event for them. But there's no way that I would be able to do that, even for the money. I would have wanted to, put some of my own spin, personality, contacts into that. So, that's fine. Like, we both realize that. It's not a problem. We just need different things. And actually what I did for that company was help them hire the right person that they did need. And now we've got a really good relationship, but I'm just not the person to work for them. So always look out for those other kinds of opportunities. How can you keep that network even if it isn't the right role? But I think freelance or perm contract, thinking about what are the unique things about you that can stand out in your portfolio or CV are really good. And if you're struggling to find that and you're kind of just hitting a brick wall, then that is when asking for the support of a mentor is really good, because they can help you shape some of those things, or looking to see if you can get a coach who can help coach some of those ideas out of you using coaching techniques, and then work with you on kind of building your confidence and building your idea and building your niche in the market. That can be really beneficial, just to have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of who's got a little bit more experience and who can help you kind of shape what that future looks like.
I love that, Jade. I think that's an amazing note to end on. So for anyone else that's listening, do you want them to know how to reach out to you?
Yeah, actually, that would be great. I kind of hadn't thought of that. That's the one question. Hang on, how are they going? How can people talk to me? So at the moment, for my kind of like coaching and consultancy, I'm just in the middle of doing a bit of a brand refresh. I've got this amazing graphic designer called Neve Tooley working with me, who runs Nini Studios, and she's working on a whole bunch of branding stuff for me, which is great. So there'll be more on that soon. But for now, add me on LinkedIn under Jade Coles. On Instagram, I'm Jade Coles _. And when I'm ready to kind of announce more new business stuff, it will probably be on those platforms in the next kind of 2 weeks. And then I'll be taking private bookings at a really competitive rate while I practice my coaching and a new kind of creative coaching framework that I've actually been designing for a little while now. So yeah, keep an eye on those platforms. And yeah, I'm always shouting about everything with Isabel. So I'm sure you'll see much of me one way or another.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jade. It was so nice to talk to you, although again from afar, but we will change that soon. I'm sure we're gonna go on a tour of all of London and decide what's the best place.
Yeah, let's go to dinner. My kind of, my love language or whatever is quality time. So let's go and have like a long lunch together or something like that. In the south, I can show you some of my favorite spaces. It will probably be Levan. It's always my shout out to Levan if anybody knows it. And then we can do the same in your hood. It will be an absolute pleasure.
Perfect. Yeah, my love language is definitely food. You can bribe me with anything if there's food and coffee involved. So let's do it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jade. You're amazing. And I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the I Like Networking podcast. Please remember to share, subscribe, and review the podcast so that more people can find us. All the information discussed on this episode will be on the show notes. See you next time.